Welcome everybody. I'm so happy to see everyone. We're gonna start with our community forum. Bienvenidos a todos. Creo que vamos a empezar ya con el foro comunitario. Just to let everybody know, we do have a consecutive interpretation going on. With Rachel and I are going to be doing the interpretation. So it works in a way where we say a few sentences in English and then we're going to interpret in Spanish, and that's how we're going to be doing it. There's a few hand gestures that are important to remember, like when a speaker is going too fast for interpretation, doing like this means slow down. And then if you can't really hear the speaker or interpretation, you go like this. It means speak up. And it works like, if you see one person doing it, please follow as well so that the interpreter or the speaker knows what's going on. Entonces, solo para que sepan la interpretación, va a haber interpretación consecutiva donde hay algunos signos que podemos hacer, digamos, cuando la interpretación o la persona que está hablando va muy rápido. Esto significa que hay que ir más lento, y después, si no se escucha, podemos hacerlo así, significa hay que hablar más alto. Entonces, bueno, con eso ya vamos a empezar. We're going to start. My name is Edith. I'm here representing both Workers' Voice and Unión Migrante. Mi nombre es Edith, estoy representando Workers' Voice y Unión Migrante. And quiero darle las gracias a todos los que están aquí y también a todas las organizaciones que están participando, no solo Unión Migrante, pero también Isla. I want to thank all the organizations that are participating, including Unión Migrante and Isla as well, that we have a speaker that we're going to hear from. I want to thank IATSE as well for lending us the space. Thank you so much for working with us. That's very, very generous. Thank you so much. Quiero agradecer también a IATSE, que nos dejó usar este espacio de manera muy generosa. Muchas gracias. And I know that we're all here today because we care, right? We care about immigrant rights, we care about immigrant justice, and we are aware of the egregious attacks that are going on, that have been going on towards our immigrant community. And I'm excited to share more and to continue fighting against these attacks alongside you. Sabemos que todos están aquí porque nos importa, ¿verdad? Nos importa los derechos de los inmigrantes, la justicia para la comunidad inmigrante. Y estoy emocionada de seguir luchando, de compartir luchando en contra de estos ataques a la comunidad inmigrante. And to start off, I just want to say something that we all know, but that is really not talked about when immigration is talked about, and it's the fact that immigrant workers sustain the economy of this country. And when I think about it, probably sustain the economy of the world as well, because we have immigrant workers all around the world. And then I think about Katrina, I think about natural disasters, now tornadoes as well, and who rebuilds the city after each natural disaster, right? It's immigrant workers. And even though immigrant workers rebuild the city, they don't have access to any government program. Immigrant workers also suffer through natural disasters, also lose their houses or have damage, and there's no resources available on behalf of the government for them as well. When we talk about immigrant workers, we also have to be aware that immigrant workers are vulnerable and at risk of a lot of workplace abuse. Actually, after Katrina, there was a lot of wage theft that happened with construction workers, where you're either not paid for any of the work you do, or you're only partially paid, you're not paid for the whole amount of time that you were working. And these abuses are rampant. There's also sexual abuse, verbal abuse that happens, and being an immigrant worker, speaking up can mean putting at risk your livelihood. It means putting at risk your immigration status, and it means, there's the fear of being deported, there's the fear of some immigrant workers who are on work visas of losing that work visa, and so speaking up can be really something that can be last resort. And I know this because I am an immigrant worker who lost her visa last year after I was fired without reason, really the reason being because I was organizing in the workplace. But I was very lucky because we actually have a new protection for immigrant workers at this moment on behalf of DHS. And this protection actually grants deferred action for immigrant workers who speak up against abuses in the workplace, in the maintaining that you can prove that you were subject to labor violations. And so because there was proof that I was actually fired in retaliation for trying to organize, I was able to get deferred action. So right now I'm deferred action. And that way I don't have to go back to my country. It was really scary. It was, I already had my flight to go back home because I thought my time in the United States was done. But this is a new protection out there that really not a lot of people know about because it's so new, but something that we have to share because this is so important. And imagine being undocumented and being able to get deferred action, at least for 2 years, because it's not indefinitely. But yeah, we do have those protections available as well. And so to start, I also want to remind everybody, if you have any questions, we will have a discussion at the end. And also remind everybody that Unión Migrante is a volunteer organization, and we're actually fundraising through the sale of tacos. That goes to a bond fund that members are able to access in case that they get arrested or arrested by ICE. And also Workers' Voice is volunteer run, and we also accept donations. To start, I wanna bring Alfredo from Unión Migrante, who's gonna be sharing with us, and thank you so much, Alfredo, for being here.
Sí. Hola, buenas tardes.
Hello,
Gracias por venir.
Thank you for being here.
Mi nombre es Alfredo Salazar.
My name is Alfredo Salazar.
Soy originario de México.
I'm from Mexico originally.
Vengo de una comunidad indígena del estado de Hidalgo.
I come from an indigenous community from Hidalgo.
El nombre de esta comunidad indígena es Otomí.
The name of the indigenous community I'm from is Otomí.
Y crecí en esta comunidad conociendo sus costumbres y también un poco de su dialecto.
I grew up in that community. I knew some of their kind of customs and ways of living, and I learned their dialect.
Y por la necesidad, la crisis económica en mi país, la crisis de violencia que se vive por malos gobiernos corruptos.
And due to the necessity of the situation, the economic crisis that I grew up in, the crisis of violence that I grew up in, that we lived in every day, pretty much because of corrupt politicians,
Yo, como muchos mexicanos, tuve que emigrar a este país.
I, like so many Mexicans, had to immigrate to this country.
Después de cruzar el río Bravo o el río Grande,
After crossing the Rio Bravo or the Rio Grande,
de forma ilegal, claro,
illegally of course,
llegué a la ciudad de Atlanta
I came to the city of Atlanta.
y viví 10 años en esta ciudad.
I lived 10 years there.
Poco después me fui al estado de Alabama,
A little bit later than that, I went to Alabama,
donde viví 4 años más o menos.
where I lived like 4 years or so.
Después a Massachusetts,
Then I moved to Massachusetts,
donde estuve como 2 años.
where I lived for 2 years.
Y finalmente regresé al sur, a esta ciudad de Nueva
And
Orleans.
finally, I came back to the south, to the city of New Orleans.
Hoy, gracias a Dios, después de tantos años,
Today, thanks to God, after so many years,
logré obtener mi tarjeta de residencia.
I've been able to obtain a green card.
Soy residente legal,
I'm a legal resident,
pero durante el tiempo que no tenía documentos fui víctima de mucha discriminación.
but during the time that I was undocumented, I was the victim of a lot of discrimination.
Y uno de ellos más fuerte fue abuso laboral.
One of the most extreme abuses I suffered was labor abuse.
Siempre me mantuve trabajando
I always was able to find work,
y logré salir adelante siempre.
and I was always able to find a way to make it.
Pero aún el día de hoy, con documentos, todavía sigo siendo víctima de discriminación en algunas partes.
But even today, now that I have a legal status, I still continue to be the victim of discrimination in a lot of ways.
Lo único que hoy puedo defenderme porque tengo más derechos como residente legal.
I feel like I'm more able to defend myself today because I have more rights as a legal resident. However,
Ahora estoy aplicando para obtener mi ciudadanía
right now I'm in the process of applying to become a citizen.
y al conocer la historia de este país,
And having gotten to know the history of this country,
que es parte del proceso de naturalización,
which is part of what they require you to do as a part of getting your citizenship or your naturalization process,
me he estado dando cuenta de cómo está el sistema político y capitalista.
I've really been seeing how the political system and the capitalist system is working in this country.
Que es quien controla todo,
That's what controls everything,
desde guerras hasta medios de comunicación,
from wars to modes of communication
dentro y fuera del país,
within and exterior to the country.
y también cómo absorbe los recursos de países y cómo la venta de armas nos afecta.
Also, I see how it sucks up the resources of countries the world over, how the arms trade originating here affects us worldwide
Y genera violencias como la guerrilla de los narcos,
and generates violence such as the warfare of narcos in our countries.
Por causa de esto, muchos países quedan hundidos en pobreza y hambre,
Because of this cycle originating here, a lot of our countries are left in a vicious cycle of hunger and violence.
Esto genera violencia
It generates
y
violence.
sus ciudadanos luchan y pelean entre ellos por tratar de sobrevivir,
And people in our countries of origin fight amongst each other just to try and find a way to survive.
y las familias que viven en esos países pues no tienen más que abandonar sus hogares,
A lot of people in our countries of origin have no other option but to abandon their homes
siempre buscando un mejor futuro en otros países.
and seeking a better future in other countries.
Muchos llegan aquí buscando el sueño americano que para muchos no existe.
Many of them come to this country chasing after the American dream, which in reality for many is not a reality.
Y son tratados inhumanamente como verdaderos criminales,
And they're treated inhumanely as if they were criminal bandits,
perseguidos, maltratados, humillados,
chased after, mistreated, humiliated,
encerrados en centros de detención,
locked up in detention centers.
entre comillas, porque para mí son campos de concentración.
Within quotations, we can call them detention centers because for me what they really are is concentration camps.
En Louisiana tenemos varios como Geo Group, Core Civic, La Salle, Correction and Management, Training Corporation,
We have a lot in Louisiana, like Geo Group, Core Civic, LaSalle, Correction and Management, Training Corporation,
entre otros.
among others.
Esto se ha convertido en un negocio para empresas privadas.
It's become a big business for private companies to detain immigrants.
Ellos reciben de $100 a $150 por persona detenida.
They get $100 to $150 a night per
Por día.
person detained, per day. Per day.
En algunos casos, personas que buscan asilo necesitan hacer trámites para obtener su estatus legal.
A lot of times people who come seeking asylum have to go through a long and arduous court process to be able to obtain that legal status.
lograr eso puede llegar a costar hasta $5,000 el trámite.
To be able to do that, that whole legal process could cost over $5,000.
Pero los requisitos son difíciles de conseguir a propósito, que muchos no cumplen con ellos.
They make the threshold of hoops you have to jump through legally difficult on purpose, so that many people may not qualify.
Después de haber estado en centros de detención por mucho tiempo, son devueltos a su país.
And many people, after having to put up with the hardship of detention centers for a very long time, even so are deported to their country of origin.
Mientras por otro lado los políticos usan el tema migratorio para campañas políticas.
Meanwhile, elected officials, politicians use the hot button issue of immigration for their political campaigns.
Es triste que estas personas busquen votos con mentiras
It's heartbreaking that people seek out votes with lies
y lucren con sufrimiento de familias.
and that they get rich off of the suffering of families.
Y yo la verdad me pregunto hasta cuándo va a terminar estas leyes racistas,
And really I ask myself,
antimigrantes,
when are these racist, anti-immigrant laws going to come to an end?
esta mala práctica de políticos mentirosos que están a la orden de capitalistas.
This is the bad behavior and the bad practice of capitalist politicians who are at the orders of the wealthy elite.
Porque la verdad, como muchos sabemos, los inmigrantes aportamos mucho a este país.
So many of us who are immigrant workers, we know how much we contribute to this country.
Vivimos y trabajamos aquí, pagamos impuestos,
We live here, we work here, we pay taxes,
reconstruimos las ciudades después de desastres naturales,
we rebuild the city after every natural disaster.
muchas veces con sueldos miserables y abusos laborales,
A lot of the time at miserable pay rates and with a
Como-
lot of labor abuse, such as
como robo de pago y exceso de horas de trabajo,
robbing us of overtime hours, low hourly pay.
como muchos durante la pandemia que estaban sin trabajo y sin comida y sin apoyo económico.
A lot of immigrants during the pandemic were without money, without food, without jobs, and without any government support or social safety net,
Solo por no tener un seguro social.
just because we didn't have a social security number.
Muchos perdieron la vida.
A lot of people died,
Desesperados por sobrevivir y arriesgándole salieron a trabajar.
lost their lives because they had no other option to put food on the table but to go to work, put themselves at risk, and ended up getting sick with COVID.
Esto los llevó a infectarse por el virus. Esto nadie reconoce. Mantuvo estable la economía.
Many immigrant workers got sick with the virus, and we so seldom take time to recognize that immigrant workers sustained the economy during the pandemic.
Porque el trabajo de construcción, el campo y otros ramos no se detuvo durante la pandemia.
Don't think for a second that construction work came to a halt during the pandemic. You know that agricultural workers kept food on the table throughout the pandemic.
Y aún así, con todos los problemas, aquí estamos.
And despite all of these challenges, all of these problems, we're still on our feet, we're still here, we're still fighting.
Salimos adelante con nuestras familias aquí y ayudamos a nuestros familiares en nuestros países.
We fight for a better life for our families every day. We support our families here and we send money back home to support our families in our countries of origin.
Enviándoles remesas, que eso contribuye también a la economía de nuestros países.
We send remittances that are a massive contribution to the economies of our country of origin,
Además también es una pequeña fuente de descolonización democrática.
which is a trickle of decolonization and democratization that we're able to take as workers and put back in our countries of origin through our work.
Los inmigrantes somos luchadores por naturaleza.
We as immigrants were born fighters.
Continuaremos luchando para educarnos y así aprender a defendernos de las injusticias.
We're going to continue to keep fighting. We're going to continue to educate ourselves and learn how to defend ourselves against injustices.
Y lograr un estatus legal en este país, sacando el voto de los latinos nacidos aquí.
We're going to fight to all be able to obtain a legal status here in this country. We're going to fight to turn out Latinx voters.
Y de muchos que lograron su ciudadanía.
We're especially fighting to turn out the vote of Latinos who are born here who may be able to vote, or for those who've been able to obtain a legal status.
Y por supuesto con el apoyo de muchos de ustedes que apoyan a los inmigrantes.
And of course, we're counting on the support of so many of you who support immigrants.
A quien les invito a participar también en nuestra marcha que vamos a llevar a cabo el 1 de mayo de este año.
So I'd love to invite you all to join us for our annual march that will be taking place May 1st for International Workers' Day, May 1st this year.
Nosotros organizamos esta marcha cada año
We organize this march every year
en esta ciudad
here in our city.
porque sabemos que toda la lucha y esfuerzo es por el bien de las futuras generaciones.
We know that our collective fights and everything we do is for the well-being of future generations.
Esto hará más grande este hermoso país.
To make our country even more beautiful.
También deseo que algún día podamos vivir felices y en paz.
We dream of the day that we can all live together happy and in peace.
Y por todo lo que hacemos los inmigrantes en México y en otros países nos llaman héroes.
Back home in our countries of origin, in Mexico for instance, those of us who have immigrated here, they call us heroes
Porque eso es lo que somos. Y que viva la libertad. Gracias.
because that's what we are for all that we've been through. And long live liberty, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Vero. That was so powerful, and thank you for sharing your story as well. I think there are so many important points in that, tying up incarceration, talking about how immigrant work is sustained in the economy as well, and how, when I think about incarceration, I think about detention centers, but it's all tied up with mass incarceration, and how, obviously, capitalists are trying to make profit out of putting people in jail, out of robbing people from their freedom. Yes?
Hey, what's that, Santi? I'm still learning English. I speak English, but I prefer this message would be on perfect English. That's what I prefer to interpret.
Thank you. And now we have Teresa from ISLA. ISLA is a really amazing immigration services, legal services organization that right now is under attack by no other than Jeff Landry. And we're really happy for her to be here and share a little bit more about what's going on.
First of all, I want to thank y'all for allowing us to come in here and share a little bit more about what's going on. Just briefly, for those that don't know, ISLA stands for Immigration Services and Legal Advocacy. So we're a small nonprofit based out of New Orleans. We provide free legal representation for immigrants. And our focus right now, like Alfredo said, there's a lot of detention centers here in Louisiana. On a daily basis, 4,000 plus people are detained. A lot of them don't have access to legal counsel, and that's where we come in. And we focus on trying to provide services for people that are detained here in Louisiana. And unfortunately, our Attorney General, Jeff Landry, issued a subpoena against 3 small nonprofits here in New Orleans. The first one is Home is Here, ISLA, and also the Louisiana Advocates for Immigrants in Detention. And in the subpoena, he's demanding for us to identify all of the asylum seekers that we provide aid to, any government support that they receive, and contracts between our organizations and the government, amongst other things. On its face, what Landry is trying to do with this subpoena is to support his legal ability to allege legal claims, to challenge the Biden administration's immigration policies in the federal lawsuit, Arizona versus Garland. So a little bit about that lawsuit. It's a lawsuit that was filed back in 2022 when Landry and several other Republican attorney generals filed it against the U.S. Attorney General Garland and others. The suit argues that the new asylum rules that seek to reduce the backlog in the immigration courts and the system would lead to a, quote, substantial increase in the approval of asylum claims, and then they argue that states like Louisiana and the other states that are arguing this case would have to spend more money on education, healthcare, and law enforcement if immigrants decided to settle here. For us, the Attorney General should know that our information is private and it's confidential information and it's protected by attorney-client privilege. If he's allowed to tear through this fundamental legal principle in his attack on immigrants, what's to stop him from doing the same against other political opponents? Nothing. The subpoena demonstrates his willingness to abuse his office's power in a sorry attempt to bolster his political career. Isla, we won't be bullied, and we will continue to defend our clients' rights. We are asking a judge right now to quash the request, and we do have an oral argument set for April 4th in Lafayette at 10 a.m. Anyone is welcome to come. I know we will be traveling there, and other supporters will be traveling. Something that the community has been asking is, how can we help? And at the moment, it's just sharing this information with your networks, continuing to support our organizations, whether it's through donations and also volunteer work. And we will keep everyone updated to see what happens with this case.
Thank you so much, Teresa, and to Isla for fighting this fight. And yeah, we all know that Jeff Landry is racist, sexist person, and we can see how far he's willing to go. And I think we should all really keep fighting against him and raise our voices, because I don't want to know what it's like to have Jeff Landry as a governor. That is a very scary thought. So next we have Sally from Workers' Voice, who's gonna share with us about immigration and capitalism and immigration.
So, right now, we're seeing an historic assault on all workers' rights, and none are facing harsher, more concentrated attacks than our immigrant siblings. Some of what I'm going to talk about is going to echo what Alfredo has already said. I can keep going? Yeah. Okay. But I want to go into a little more detail to illustrate how the U.S. immigration system is intentionally designed for the super exploitation of immigrant workers by the rich. The goal of that system is to create an atmosphere of fear, desperation, and reliance upon that system, which is difficult to navigate and easy to be trapped in. One major example is the guest worker programs such as H-2A and H-2B, which allow businesses to import, as they put it, seasonal workers, making them entirely reliant on their employers. They are forced to work for low wages and dangerous conditions, and because the programs restrict workers to their specific jobs and allow them to be fired and deported for any reason, it becomes difficult for guest workers to organize and fight back. Employers ignore what few rules there are, pay guest workers pennies, and force them to work under brutal, often fatal conditions. In the last decade, farm workers with H-2A visas have come in record numbers. Many of them are preyed upon by recruiters who charge illegal fees and use their debt to control them, trapping them in low-wage jobs and oftentimes literally working them to death, forcing them to work without water or work breaks, all while being extremely underpaid by their employers. And these are the workers who literally feed our entire country. Meanwhile, the H-2B program lets the rich fill jobs in other sectors, ranging from seafood processors here in Louisiana to healthcare workers to a wide range of construction jobs. Attorney General Jeff Landry, who I believe it's already been mentioned is running for governor, has spent his political career spreading anti-immigrant hate. It was revealed in 2020 that he used the H-2B program to exploit hundreds of workers through construction companies that he and his brother owned. Like many corporations that take advantage of these programs, Landry's companies were part of an elaborate scheme involving shady recruiter in Houston and falsified documents. So Landry made himself much richer off of the labor of immigrants while spreading hate and division, knowing that the lies that he was spreading only made it easier to make that profit. The right wing claims that the problem with these programs is that immigrants replace non-immigrant workers. But the truth is, the super rich in this country created this program so that they could treat human beings like expendable slaves that they buy and sell, using them and discarding them whenever they want to. It's not our immigrant siblings who intentionally fire or don't hire workers, but the rich parasites who use unemployment as a weapon against us. The lies they tell about immigrant workers are designed to divide us so we can't stand up against their capitalist greed. Things are absolutely no better for undocumented workers. The constant threat of ICE is a weapon against any attempts to fight for better conditions. As many here may recall, the Hard Rock Hotel collapse that killed an immigrant worker, a white worker, and a black worker was not an unexpected event. An undocumented construction worker named Delmar Joel Ramirez Palma was deported for repeatedly blowing a whistle on the unsafe conditions of the construction site. The developer used ICE as their enforcers to silence him. His story is absolutely not unique. ICE and the Border Patrol have a long history of terrorizing immigrant workers who speak out. And all immigrant workers, truly, but especially those who speak out. And then there are the detention centers, which, as Alfredo rightly said, are concentration camps for immigrant workers. These are mostly privately owned, for-profit prisons. And as was said, in Louisiana, there are more of these than any other state besides Texas. These centers hold thousands of immigrant workers from all over the world, especially Latino, Caribbean, and African workers. And in Louisiana, most of these centers are owned by Geo Group, another one of the corporations that Alfredo mentioned, who has been subject to multiple class action suits for the treatment of detainees. Just this week, Geo Group was sued for using chemicals that have caused severe illnesses amongst detainees. And another recent class action suit was filed by 40,000 people, charging that the corporation used detainees for forced labor in Colorado, meaning literally slavery. Similar conditions exist in these privately owned concentration camps around the country. And many of those who are kept in these facilities have been children, which was widely reported in 2020, but has been curiously absent from the media for the last several years. To put that in very specific numbers, Geo Group made $172 billion in profits off their detention centers last year. That's up 144% from 2021. This is what we mean by super exploitation. They make billions by forcing immigrants to work for nothing in the worst conditions imaginable. These are workers who have often left their home countries because of U.S. sanctions, wars, and bombings. But whatever the reason they've come here, they're taken by the Border Patrol or ICE to detention centers where they face abuse by guards, high rates of COVID, and separation from their families. In some cases, women have been subjected to forced hysterectomies. and trans and immune-compromised detainees have been murdered by being kept in solitary, freezing conditions. The capitalists would have us believe that the people they are detaining are criminals, or that they have come to the U.S. to take the jobs of U.S.-born workers. But the truth is, the capitalists have intentionally turned the immigration system into a system that allows the rich to use people and throw them away. All to drive down wages and to save money by not providing even basic necessities like water or safety for their workers, all in the name of profit. As the old saying goes, an injury to one is an injury to all. When immigrant workers are enslaved or forced to work for sub-minimum wage, when they are coerced into accepting terrible working conditions, the wages and conditions of all workers worsen. If the bosses believe that they can import cheaper labor from other countries, they use that as leverage against workers here to discourage organizing for better conditions. The only answer to this is solidarity. The answer is not to close the borders, but to make conditions here better for all workers, especially our immigrant siblings. We need a united front against anti-immigrant hate and against the rich who exploit our immigrant siblings. We can't listen to the lies of people like Jeff Landry. We have to know that he and his rich backers are our real enemies. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sally. Really great points, and I think something that Sally touched upon is to also think about imperialism and how imperialism really creates the horrible conditions in countries that can make us decide to try to migrate for a better future. And we can talk about a lot of things concerning imperialism, but we also have to take into account how U.S. companies go to Latin America to, on purpose, to put basically to outsource their jobs. In Honduras we have las maquilas. They're where clothes, I can't remember the name for it in English, but basically where all the clothes are made. And these huge companies pay barely a minimum wage in Honduras, and the workers there, my mom was a doctor in this maquilas, and could see how the workers there had injuries because of the manual labor that they're doing. And these injuries were an injury that was going to affect workers all their life. Because of the manual labor that you're doing, your body your body gets hurt. But this is just another way that imperialism is affecting Latin America and is creating the conditions to need for migration, to need to migrate for a better future. So now we have a couple of speakers from Unión Migrante, if I can call Olga and Rafael.
Ok, buenas tardes a todos.
Hi, good evening to everybody.
Bueno, para empezar me alegra saber que hay organizaciones que están para educarnos a nosotros como migrantes.
To start, I'm really happy to see that there's organizations out there to create awareness and to educate everybody about immigrant rights and immigrant workers.
Doy gracias a Dios por la vida de cada uno.
I thank God for the lives of each and every one of you.
Bueno, tengo un montón de cosas que contar, pero voy a resumirlas. Son varias historias de 14 años que ya llevo viviendo acá en este país.
I have many stories to tell, but I will try to summarize. It's been 14 years that I've been living in this country.
Pero quiero hablar lo primero, que es algo que siempre sucede muy a menudo, podría decir que constantemente, lo que es el racismo.
And I want to start talking about something that really is a constant, which is racism.
El racismo es uno de mis peores enemigos porque lo he vivido y he visto cómo mi comunidad sufre de eso.
Racism is one of the worst things because I've lived through it and I see how my community is affected by it.
Ahora que las elecciones ya de presidentes están próximas, creo que vienen tiempos muy difíciles.
Now that elections are coming up, I think there's really hard times ahead.
Nuestra comunidad es como el plato fuerte para un presidente llegar a la Casa Blanca.
My community is like the main dish used to get to the White House.
El presidente que se hace más racista creo que es el que gana.
I feel like the president who's the most racist is the one that wins.
Y eso es muy doloroso porque venimos a este país por sueños, por metas y por luchas.
And that's really sad because we come here with a lot of hopes and dreams and struggles.
No venimos a darnos una vida de millonarios.
We don't come here to live a millionaire life.
Venimos por sueños y por luchas.
We come here with our own hopes and our own struggles.
Que es dar lo mejor a nuestra familia.
Which is to provide and give the best to our families.
Y dar lo mejor a este país.
And give our best to this country as well.
Porque trabajamos para poder dar lo mejor, me refiero a lo que pasó con Katrina. Trabajamos demasiado y ustedes se han dado cuenta que Louisiana ha crecido y creció.
Yeah, and when I talk about this, we come here to give our best. I also talk about Katrina, how we rebuilt it, and now the city is vibrant again.
Entonces aquí estaremos luchando por nuestros sueños y bueno, el otro punto que quiero hablar es sobre que no tenemos acceso a las ayudas del gobierno.
And well, we're still here and we keep on fighting. And the other thing that I want to mention is that we don't really have any access to any government or social programs.
Como los seguros médicos, que es muy difícil para un inmigrante poder adquirirlos.
Like health insurance or healthcare, which is really hard as an immigrant to be able to access.
Y para adquirir una cita en el hospital con un especialista lleva meses.
And to get an appointment with a specialist in a hospital, it takes months.
Y eso es bien frustrante porque a veces habemos personas que necesitamos la cita lo más cercano que se pueda, pero por no tener seguro social se nos hace muy difícil.
And it's really hard because sometimes we need an appointment really soon, and because of being immigrants, it takes so long.
Pero aquí estamos, quiero darle gracias por haberme escuchado y le voy a dar tiempo a mi compañera.
Yeah, and thank you. We're still here, and thank you all for listening. And now, my friend is gonna.
Buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Olga. Yo también soy de México. Bueno, yo emigré acá a Estados Unidos porque, pues, por motivos de trabajo, por carencias, que pues, por ejemplo, I'm sorry.
Hello, good evening, everybody. My name is Olga. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And I migrated from Mexico, and I migrated for work, for reasons related to work.
Sí, llegué aquí y me di la oportunidad de aprender a trabajar en construcción, porque ese es mi trabajo, reconstruir casas.
When I came here, I actually learned how to do different jobs in construction, and that's really what I'm working right now. I work in construction with houses.
Y bueno, de esa manera yo he podido sacar a mi familia adelante.
And through this work, I've actually been able to sustain and to be able to support my family.
Y con el tiempo, de verdad, yo me he dado cuenta que he visto las injusticias que se cometen con las personas que las encarcelan.
And throughout time, I've seen so many injustices and so many people who are put behind bars.
Sin importar que sean padres o madres, dejando los hijos desamparados.
No matter if they're fathers or mothers, and separating families and leaving their kids without their parents.
Y pues nosotros queremos seguir luchando, ¿verdad? Para que ya no exista esa separación de padres e hijos.
And we want to keep on fighting because we want to put an end to this separation of families.
Porque muchos de nosotros trabajamos, ¿verdad? Como les digo, en construcción, otros trabajan en el campo, sembrando, cosechando los frutos que llevamos a la casa.
And so we know a lot of us work in construction, but a lot of us are farm workers and are actually harvesting the food that we all eat.
Y como ya comentó también de que, por ejemplo, nosotros pues pasamos por pandemias, huracanes, pues todas las inclemencias del tiempo.
And we've been through pandemics and hurricanes and all the natural disasters.
Y aún así nosotros trabajamos. ¿Por qué trabajamos? Porque pues tenemos que tener dinero para pagar renta, biles, que esos no nos esperan si nos quedamos en casa, porque no tenemos quien nos dé.
And we're still working through this because we need to work, we need to pay rent, we need to pay bills.
Sí, y a pesar de los riesgos, pues tenemos que estar ahí, ¿verdad? Y muchas personas que trabajamos después de cuando pasó la pandemia, que no nos quedamos en casa.
And we have to work with all these risks, and many of us had to work through the pandemic or after the pandemic. We were never at home.
Porque pues no tenemos el apoyo del gobierno como para quedarnos en casa y no trabajar.
Because we don't have any support from the government to stay home.
Debido a eso, muchas personas perdieron la vida porque se contaminaron, se contagiaron con el virus, dejando familias e hijos.
And because of this, a lot of people actually got COVID and died and left behind their families and their kids.
Sí, porque no tenemos servicios médicos como para asistir a una clínica y que se nos dé esa medicación.
And we also don't have access to healthcare. We don't have health insurance to access the medications that we need in the services.
Como migrantes padecemos muchas cosas que no gozamos como las que gozan las personas que tienen sus propios documentos, que son ciudadanos.
And as immigrants, we don't have access to the programs that many U.S. born citizens have access to.
Entonces, nosotros ahora no queremos que se nos regale o que se nos dé nada gratis, ¿verdad? Lo que queremos es una oportunidad para seguir trabajando.
And we don't want anything for free. We're not asking for anything, any gifts. We just want to keep on working.
Que se nos reconozca lo que nosotros aportamos en este país.
And we want to have our work be recognized, all that we do for this country.
Que se nos apoye con una amnistía para todos y así poder salir sin miedo a la calle, sin miedo a que vemos al policía y le cortamos vuelta, ¿verdad?
And we want amnesty for all. We want to be able to go outside our houses without fear. We want to be out in our communities without fear.
Sí, como para tener un sueldo mejor, para vivir mejor.
We want better wages. We want a better condition, a better life.
Para una buena educación de los hijos.
We want better education for our kids.
para mejorar el sector de salud,
We want our healthcare services to be better and access to be better.
para no sufrir más discriminaciones.
We don't want to suffer more discrimination.
Nosotros somos personas esenciales en este país. Nosotros sacamos adelante todos los trabajos, reconstruimos desde que vino Katrina.
And we are essential to this country. We reconstructed after Katrina.
Desde cuando vino Katrina yo llegué, tenía 3 meses de haber pasado. A mí me tocó bastante, o sea, hacer bastantes cosas, reconstruir desde abajo, sacar lodo, encontrar animales muertos.
And when Katrina happened, I had 3 months of being in the city, and I had to work hard from the bottom up. I had to remove mud and remove dead animals.
Entonces yo pienso que aquí nos miran como que fuéramos criminales, pero nosotros no somos criminales, somos personas esenciales, trabajadoras, ¿verdad? Y de esa manera queremos seguir nosotros trabajando, apoyando y reconstruyendo el pueblo, la ciudad.
And I feel like we're seen as criminals, and we are actually essential, and we're always we're essential workers, and we want to keep fighting, and we want to keep working, and we want to keep rebuilding the city.
Unidos creo que podemos, ¿verdad? Si todos unimos, nos estamos, podemos lograr, porque la unión está a la fuerte.
And if we're united, I think we can do it. We know that through being united, there's strength.
Bueno, yo les doy gracias a todos ustedes porque ustedes también se han tomado el tiempo y el valor, ¿verdad?, de apoyarnos y de que estemos aquí contando nuestro vivir diario.
And I want to thank you for being here, for your time, and for your courage to speak out with us, united.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias y yo creo que en la unión está la fuerza.
Thank you so much, and remember, united there is strength. Yeah, thank you so much, and Unión Migrante for being here. Now we have our next speaker from Workers' Voice, Gab.
First, I want to thank Unión Migrante. Thank you for sharing what's in your heart, in your souls, and the pain that you have endured. I'm standing in today for Joseph, one of our comrades who came down with a very bad case of COVID, and so this is kind of last minute. I'm going to skip some of my talk because it was expressed already very much by many of the speakers previously, particularly how U.S. capitalism, imperialism, has created the conditions across the world that have forced people to leave their beautiful homelands behind. What I want to address really is the issue of what those of us who are U.S.-born workers, who are internationalists, who want to extend a hand and create unity among all workers, and what is the work that we need to be doing. It is horrendous that these incredible criminals who loot the treasury for their war profits, who carry out wars for oil and lithium, who circle the globe for cheap labor and steal resources, and who pit workers abroad and here against each other in global competition for the cheapest price of labor. They steal everything. They have to create a situation where workers do not look at what they really are doing. Turn your attention in some other direction. Create hate. Tell the most despicable lies against the very group of workers and communities that add such an incredible amount to the economy, to our lives, to our culture. We need to go to the people. We cannot accomplish what we need to do merely on social media. Workers never see a leaflet, and they never see a demonstration. This is the most censored country probably in the world, with the grip of monopoly media corporations linked to the military that have control over everything that's said. Their vicious, slanderous, disgusting lies against migrant workers must be challenged. And we have to challenge what they say. So we have prepared, and you have it on your chair, and we hope you'll all take it and read it. A preliminary draft, your eyes on it first. All contributions welcome. Facts, myths and facts about immigration. And most of it is calculated to create class consciousness. What is class consciousness? It is understanding that the policies of the government, the policies of the corporations, and the policies, and that is state, federal, and local, emanate out of those who want to make sure that the profit system is maintained and that the extraction of profit from the labor of workers worldwide is accelerated, monopolized, and increased at all costs. And that we have nothing in common with them. In simple terms, we as workers, it is us and them. We cannot continue with this idea that there are just these good politicians and bad politicians. The attack on immigrants has been going on for many years, and at many times throughout the history of the United States, which I can't get into in this talk. Obama was called the deporter-in-chief. The Biden administration is completely gone back on repudiating the Trump's anti-immigrant policies that he carried out. Actually calling for the possibility of imprisoning children. Not that it's a great thing that many of these children are now being forced into working conditions and work across the United States for major corporations, auto companies, other manufacturers, service industries. What a crime. Separated from their families. It's heartbreaking. We have to go to workers to make them understand by factually repudiating and exposing the lies. We cannot go around it. There are some who say, oh, don't take up their lives, you're just giving it credibility. No, it's what people think. We can argue all we want and believe, and we should say it, and we can't say it enough, that there are no borders in the workers' struggle, that there are no illegal human beings. But that alone is not enough. We have to go where people are, and we have been leafleting, for example, for this forum on the street as part of an educational process, and many workers, white and black, and even Latinx who've been here for many years, echo some of the things that you hear from the mouth of someone like Landry or the capitalist politicians. It's had an effect. But yet the reality is they can go ahead and bail out the banks again. They can go ahead and loot the treasury for the military budget up to 1.2 trillion when you add everything together. At the same time, in that military appropriations bill, they gave a green light to go ahead and cut pandemic food stamps. 42 million people, and there should be many more who are on SNAP, are losing substantial food stamp benefits. I lost $100 a month. And on Social Security alone, that's a hit. Others have gone from almost $300 a month down to $20 a month. Whole families have lost hundreds. As one food bank said when they explained there's no way they can meet the demand, they said it's a tsunami of hunger being faced in the United States. And remember that undocumented workers receive not even this benefit, insubstantial as it's now going to be. In May, and that was part of the military defense authorization bill. And what about the food prices we're facing, or the gasoline prices? The oil billionaires, the oil company profits doubled and tripled. Exxon made $56 billion in profits last year. And so they had to raise the price of gas. The food corporation profits soared while prices rose 20% and housing went up 14%. This is criminal. Why is there no price control? Why is there no rollback of prices? Why is there price gouging and profit mongering instead? But they tell people, oh, it's a supply shortage. That is not true. During the first 2 years of the pandemic, 10 of the richest men in the world doubled their fortune to $1.5 trillion, while 99% of humanity's incomes fell. And we are facing a global hunger and even starvation crisis. U.S. billionaires added $5 trillion to their wealth, surging 70%. And immigrants are to blame? New Orleans, where 63% of the city budget goes to cops and jails, and 1% to job creation, and 3% to families and children. And 1/3 of the children here live in poverty. Institutionalized racism is in every sphere of the city. What is money being used for in Atlanta or Cop City, a militarized Cop 4 training center, in counterinsurgency? What, in case of food rebellions? Class antagonisms are intensifying. And the capitalists feel that they can go ahead and forward with a war on the workers here. And as always, this hits heaviest on communities of color. But there is one more ingredient to their monopoly of the media. There is one more ingredient that they need in addition to their prisons and jails. There is one more ingredient they need, and that is necessary to counter out their efforts to impoverish us, and that is division, scapegoating, and fear-mongering. Some think that the capitalists maintain their power solely by repression alone, and that is part of it, be it military or police or courts and jails. But it's not. It's also bribery. It's also flattery. And it's also lies, racism, and so on. The capitalists know that immigrants add trillions to the economy and are essential. And while undocumented workers are at most 5% of the workforce in the United States, they are 73% of farm workers in food processing. And in many of the food processing chicken and pork plants, hundreds of immigrant workers who worked all through the worst parts of the pandemic, which is not over, died from COVID as well as their families. And they got no stimulus money. The lies are echoed by the corporate media, the Koch foundations and think tanks, and the Biden administration, which has reneged on every immigration promise. We must show workers here the truth. Most workers, as I said, never see a leaflet or a protest. Our social media is unknown to them. Right here in Louisiana, workers have the most to gain by rejecting attacks on immigrants and for supporting full legalization for immigrant workers, full equality for immigrant workers. We want to take this fact sheet that we've put together, put it in better shape, maybe cut it a little bit, And we want to ask all of you to join us in an effort to go directly to the workers with this piece of literature, not only in New Orleans, but in other cities. I know from being many years as a union organizer that when workers are in struggle, their minds can change rapidly. It is easier to understand and identify the enemy. It is easier to have unity amongst all workers in the course of the heat of battle. And so at the same time, our work must include the fight against these food stamp cuts, must include the fight for housing, and for medical care. And in that fight, that's not separate from the fight for immigrant rights. We are fed by immigrant workers and they cannot get unemployment or food stamps? That is a crime. And so our literature will make sure that we include, and in the course of the work we do, in the Workers' Voice Socialist Movement, whatever we are organizing around, we bring in the scourge of militarism and its social and its economic effect, bad effect that it has on everything that we've done, and how it actually creates the political force that is creating the right wing itself. The Louisiana Women's Action Committee, which some of us work in, is initiating a Food is a Right campaign. We have to work very hard to bring this to food banks and every place so that people from the community become the leaders of the struggle. And we appeal to you to join this campaign. And the first planning meeting will be on April 22nd. So I want to end by saying that we need a new way of looking at the struggle. We are not relying on any politicians. They get campaign contributions. We don't view them as campaign contributions. We view them as bribes. No corporation gives a politician any money except to expect something in return. It cost $90 million in the last governor's election. And who are we facing in this governor's election? I don't know how old, or if young people know the old Mutt and Jeff cartoon, but I'm proposing we have a slogan that says, vote for any Mutt but Jeff. Like we did with David Duke, when we said, vote for the crook. Edwards, the other Edwards, the other crook. We have got to defeat him, and we have got to go to the workers and say, he's your enemy. He is destroying your life. He is harming you. He is keeping the minimum wage down. He is fighting to maintain control over women. He is the one that's who is fomenting hatred against queer and trans people. These are all an attempt to divide us as workers. And we must stand up in whatever organizing we're doing to say no. But we have to go with facts in hand and conversation. Like we do when we're organizing a union, we don't say, oh, what are you talking about? Why are you complaining about dues? Well, that's what the company tries to tell people. Oh, and what are you going to say? Oh, I don't want to talk about that. We have the goods on them. There is enough food in the world to feed every single human being on earth adequately. The problem is it's sold for profit, not for need. And we have to fight, is it right that anybody, whatever their citizenship or immigration status is, should not have enough food on the table? Instead, they want to give us a plate of racism to feed to our kids? So what we really think is if you're serious about wanting to stand up, that join us in these campaigns, the education campaign piece to go out. We'll all learn a lot from this. We can listen. We can rewrite things. But we must do this. And we must leave our homes, go out on the streets, stand in front of hospitals, go to other cities, go up to Lafayette, Landry's home, stomping grounds where he thinks he can do anything he wants, and go out there and change minds. I have personally, in my lifetime as an organizer, seen the most backward white workers. I'm not talking about organizing the Klan. I'll tell you what I would do to the Klan. Anybody got an imagination? They just have to be stopped. But I remember this one time when I was organizing the school bus drivers in Boston, Massachusetts. It was about 50% black workers and 50% white workers from South Boston. There was a big racist struggle against busing that had happened. They went on strike for union recognition together. And after the strike was won due to the unity, there were some racists who came to one of the schoolyards where there was mostly black bus drivers with baseball bats. And the next day, the white workers from that union were outside that school bus depot with their own baseball bats, challenging any racist that would harm their union brothers. It was a revolution of their minds that took place in the struggle. And so we have to fight for the things that people need. We have to fight for what workers need, for what families need, and we have to be inclusive in that struggle for all immigrants and all workers, and fight the struggle against racism and all bigotry at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gab. I think that was a great way to wrap up the speakers. I think the only last point that I'd like to make is to recognize that we are on stolen land, and to recognize that all these borders were constructed after the genocide of indigenous people as well. And one other point, Gab mentioned the military-industrial complex and the billions and billions of dollars that really are coming from our taxes and that are being used for wars, but also for militarization of the world, that come from Central America, where we've lived through several coups that are US-backed, from the 2009 coup in Honduras to the coup that took down Arbenz, who was trying to do land reform in Guatemala. So I think it's important to recognize those 2 points. I think now we're just going to end with Elena from Workers' Voice, who has an announcement, and then we have discussion. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Elena. Just a couple quick announcements. I'm with Workers' Voice Socials Movement, and there's a couple actions in the next few weeks that we're going to be uplifting and showing about that. The first one's actually tomorrow for Vari Robertson and Chris Joseph. These are 2 black men that were killed by Jefferson Parish Police outside the IHOP in Gretna in March 2019, and their families still have not received any justice. These are both fathers, grew up in the 9th Ward and Broadmoor area, that were targeted by police under this false drug bust pretense. And that'll be taking place tomorrow at noon at the Jefferson Parish District Attorney's Office. And the next one will be in April for Ronald O'Neill of Monroe, Louisiana. It's a little ways away, but we're going to have a few people driving up to support his family. He was 49 when he was killed by state troopers, and who then proceeded to lie to his family, to his mother, and say that his death was a result of an accident. When really it was a traffic stop where they they chased him and drug him out of his car, tased him, beat him to death, absolutely tortured this poor man. And the body cam footage wasn't released until a couple of years later. And there's been some weak indictments brought against the officers, but the family is unhappy. The mother is demanding justice, and so we're going to be going up April 8th to Farmerville for a protest, and then they'll be having another one on the 11th, but sadly we can't make that. But if you're interested in coming out to either of those, and would like a ride, please talk to me or one of my other Socialist Workers' Voice comrades. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And we're actually going to take the discussion outside if you want to join us. And thank you again to IATSE for being so generous and letting us use this space. Thank you all for being here. We hope that we can continue doing community forums like this as well. That's it. Thank you. Sí, las preguntas las vamos a hacer afuera. We're going to do questions and discussion outside.